You're watching StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh, Revi. This week on Talking Point, we're discussing the potential security threat of Chinese or other foreign companies to India's highways. No, not the physical roads, but the super information highway. Joining us, Ashwani Mahajan. He's the national co-convenor of the Swadeshi Jagran Manch. We also are joined from the capital itself by someone who describes himself as working in between the crossroads of technology, marketing, content. That is, of course, we are joined by Rajneil Kamath. He also has worked with Google India and is the publisher of NewsChecker in a fact-checking organization. Thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Mahajan, if I can start with you now, with the coronavirus, we've seen how people have increased their use of apps on the net. Whether you look at a Chinese company like TikTok, it has figures of over 2 billion lifetime users. Whether you look at Zoom, which has zoomed up from, say, 10 million to 300 million daily meeting participants. But Mr. Mahajan, you yourself have been raising the issue of potential security threats from apps like this for a long time, much before COVID. You've even written to the Prime Minister's office. That was a year back. Mr. Mahajan, what specifically are your security concerns, say, vis-a-vis data transfer in terms of the apps that we were talking about, whether it's TikTok or Zoom or any of the other apps that are being used currently?
So the issue was raised in Parliament some time ago, and then TikTok said that we are at present not transferring to the institution which was referred to in the Parliament, that was China Telecom. But they didn't mention that whether they are sending this information to any other Chinese government institution or not. So the issue is very clear that they have been transferring data, and as per the reports, we find that they have been transferring data. The study shows that they have transferred 69% of the data to US, and then sends data to China Telecom, Vigo Video, of to Tencent, Beauty Plus, to Mutu, and QQ and UC browser. So these are and to its parent owned by Alibaba.
Right.
You see, data is being transferred. There is no doubt about it, and even they are not denying that. But they are not telling in black and white how much data they are sending. But a study also shows that TikTok and Hello wants 45% more permissions than other similar applications, and you can very well imagine what these permissions are for, and how this data is being used and sent to different locations. And now you see, this is about the data transfer, and also the fact that when this data is being transferred, China, we are not really having very good relations with China strategically, and this data about the locations, about the, and these locations also include our strategic locations, because our armed forces also make use of these Chinese apps. Sometime back, I'm not talking only of TikTok, even in other Chinese apps. Sometime back, the Defense Ministry told the armed forces to ask the Jawans to delete the apps. About 40 apps they asked to delete. So this very well clears that even Defense Ministry is very well aware of this strategic concerns. So data transfer is a very big issue. Data transfer is not with a time lag. Data transfer is instantaneous, and nobody knows even if the attacks by the terrorists, including the one in which more than 40 of our Jawans were killed. So these are
Wow.
very well can be imagined to be linked with such kind of data transfers. So
Right, Rajvi,
it has got strategic concerns.
absolutely. If I can just bring you in to explain to someone like me who doesn't really know technology, and a lot of other people who use technology but may not really be aware of what's happening there, in terms of infrastructure. Like when we talk about China and strategic infrastructure, we've seen whether it's the Maldives, whether it's Sri Lanka, we're talking about physical infrastructure, ports, roads, bridges that are built, and subsequently debt is built up to such an extent that they have to give 99-year leases or give away the port. But here we're talking about technology, which is being used similarly, right?
Right. Amitabh, what tends to happen is with technology, everything is real time. As you use it, data is being accumulated, and that data is going to be stored somewhere. It could either be within the borders of China, could be within the borders of India, could be Singapore, where a lot of data centers are, or could also be the US. Um, there's, of course, no clarity. Some apps don't give us clarity as to where they're storing data. And just as Mr. Mahajan mentioned, the armed forces specifically has asked its people not to use phones manufactured in China, specifically those that are Chinese OEMs, as compared to, let's say, an iPhone, which is also assembled in China but still an American company, so their data centers reside somewhere else. Um, we are seeing the emergence of two kinds of technology companies, right? There are Chinese companies on one side, and then there are American companies on the other side. And often we find that there is a lot of discomfort that people have with Chinese companies as compared to American companies. And that's probably because when you look at it from the Indian perspective, there are a lot of common shared values that India has with the United States. We've also seen US companies actively battling the US government to not hand over data or to not censor content or anything of that sort, which unfortunately we don't know what's happening in China, for example, right? So there is a lot of distrust that comes from there. And I think that's one of the reasons why Chinese companies are viewed with far more suspicion, far more doubt than the American companies that we see. But having said that, there's one thing we need to note, that the Chinese companies have in a very nice manner, managed to build apps for Bharat, while the American companies have managed to build apps for India. And that dichotomy is very, very evident.
Mr. Mahajan, again, you were mentioning data, and as you said, say some of the companies like TikTok said that their data was not in China, but you are citing reports that show that it has, despite them saying that their servers are either in the US or Singapore. There are a lot of allegations against companies like this that it's not just the data, but say their workers are trained by the Chinese Communist Party, or they have some level of indoctrination or control over them, which means that even if their data servers are in the US or Singapore, under Chinese law, if the government wants any data that, say, these companies have, they have to provide it. Is that correct? Is that your reading, Mr. Mahajan?
Yeah, this is what the Chinese law says, because Chinese law mandates the Chinese companies to share whatever data they have. They have to. You see, it's not the case that they can't. You see, and not only that, the ideology apart, they have the what we say napak irade hain. They don't want to see the prosper India. They don't want the democracy to go on like this in a peaceful manner, and they keep on creating hatred amongst the communities, and this is no less strategically important. You see, if somebody is creating hatred amongst the communities, amongst these different religious groups, so and we day and night we find such kind of contents being sent there. For instance, very recently this was being reported by some groups, and then National Commission for Women chairperson Rekha, she also wrote to, and then she tweeted that the content has been removed as told by TikTok. But my humble question is that, you see, we ask them, they remove it, but so much of traffic is there. How much we can ask for removal? So this kind of indecent and immoral and indisciplined behavior on the part of the TikTok and even Hello, that cannot be really tolerated, and that's why I tweeted on Rekha Sharma's tweet that this is not something, we can really go keep on allowing to go on. You see,
Right.
banning is the only option before us, because every time we tell them, and when I wrote this letter to the Prime Minister, then the Ministry of Telecom, they issued a 24 questions questionnaire, and that they answered those questions in a very circumstantial manner, and even that has not been put on the in the public domain. And yesterday I tweeted to the honorable minister to make it
Yeah.
public. So
Yeah.
we need to know. We need to know
Your tweet
what they
was
are doing.
almost like it was like an RTI. You said treat this as an RTI. Just coming back to you, Rajneil, again, and this, if you can explain. Now we know the clear-cut examples that have been raised by both of you, say of usage by the armed forces or people in strategic locations. But the point that Mr. Mahajan is raising about content, how you can color views with such numbers that they have, and especially when you're looking at technology which is controlled by algorithms, you can control what is getting a lot of hits or what is being suppressed.
Yeah. Amitabh, what tends to happen is most of these are platforms, and these are platforms that are dependent on user generated content. It's people who are making content, uploading content. Many platforms have moderation policies in place, they have moderation
Yeah.
teams in place, and they're constantly trying to evolve what we call as community guidelines. So most content creators and most influencers, if I may, are supposed to adhere by these content guidelines, and platforms are also supposed to ensure that any content that goes up, A, is not unlawful, B, meets the community standards, and within the ambit of the IT Act itself, they do have certain safe harbor laws. But the moment some content is deemed to be unpalatable or not as per, not legally, not allowed within the legal framework, or is violative of something, they are supposed to take that content down.
Sure.
What tends to happen sometimes is that some of this content can be curated by platforms themselves. So it ends up getting shown more often to users and therefore a magnified reach. Or it could very well be that because you are a user and you are consuming certain types of content, the algorithm will keep showing you more and more of that same content. So it's feeding into your echo chamber in a sense. Uh, it's like watching YouTube also, which will also keep giving you more and more videos that you end up seeing. Uh, the problem sometimes tends to happen in the sheer volume of content that's coming up. B is, I think that some onus also has to be on content creators, because they're actually making this content, and of course moderators who just allowed this content to pass without seeing any problem with it, right? Whether it was
But
a
when you talk
dog.
about content creators, aren't some of these apps actually paying people to create content as well?
That's a very gray area, whether they're paying or not paying. The way these promotions happen, there are brands who are paying some of these content creators, so it's not necessarily the platform. In some cases it's the platform who might not be paying in hard cash, but kind of pushing them up the algorithm, so they're able to get a larger viewership base, right? So there are
Yeah.
multiple ways in which a platform can promote a particular content creator. There have been reports, yes, that some of them were exclusive with some of these platforms. It's often contested because some of these documents are not in the public domain. But from what has been released, it evidently did seem like some of them were on contract, were being paid. Their content had to be exclusive to the platform and not meant to be put anywhere else.
Mr. Mahajan, just explain again to us where India's data protection laws stand. We do know that there are amendments that are before Parliament. It's before the Standing Committee. I think the opposition, Shashi Tharoor, has raised the issues as well. He's the head of the IT Standing Committee. Uh, in terms of, say, the US and India. Now, am I correct, Mr. Mahajan, to say that the US can retroactively act in cases like this? It can stop and it can ask companies to sell their stake, like it's done with, say, Grinder, where it thought it could, that army personnel, military personnel could be blackmailed. Whereas India, we've just put in now FDI firewalls for countries which are bordering us. It's evident that it's China is one of them. But do our laws go far enough? Once that approval is given, can we do something like what the Americans do if we find a security breach much later in time, Mr. Mahajan?
See, there are extensive regulations on foreign funding in media, but
Yeah.
these platforms working under the garb of social media,
Yeah.
we have the problem of laws not being there, and these applications under the garb of social media platforms circumvent our domestic rules that exist to protect our national security. Therefore, we had told the government even before the second term of Narendra Modi started, we told the government that while these apps are freely available on App Store or on Play Store,
Yeah.
any app which is put on the Play Store or the App Store, they must follow Indian rules, and that can easily be implemented. I don't know why our government is finding it difficult to really control these apps, and we have time and again told the government. And my letter to the Prime Minister on 13th July 2019 has clearly asked for putting in place the law to protect Indian interest, especially the strategic interests of India, and also the to protect our social and religious harmony. And I think we can, and these apps could be controlled by way of asking them to put their offices and the data centers in India, and we can always ask them to uh, route their content through censor of some kind from government of India. And those of you, those of you, when I'm saying the journalists, sometimes put these questions that putting restrictions
Free
on the
speech.
freedom, free speech. This is no free speech. Asking some girl to get naked and putting the content of a rape on or the kind of content which is being put to harm our religious and social
Sure.
harmony. This is no freedom of expression. I beg to differ with all these gentlemen and ladies, those who try to put all these conditions. They say that we are trying to, and whenever we say that there should be some censor in the social media, then again said they start crying. I'm using these words deliberately. So the
Right.
this should be
Uh,
avoided
it's it's a
as a
fair enough
responsible citizen.
It's a fair enough
Yeah.
point. Let me flip that argument now to Rajneil also. When we talk about apps that are accused of allegedly censoring, say, political questioning. So when we're talking about China, whether it's Tiananmen, whether it's Uyghur, whether it's even the protests in Hong Kong, when people couldn't find anything on that when they searched for that. The flip side of censorship, it may seem just like an argument for free speech, which is important in its own way, but the reach, the numbers here allow apps and companies like this to frame and form narratives that go in favor of governments, right?
Yeah, I think firstly we should try and distinguish between what is clearly content moderation in terms
Yeah.
of allowing certain kinds of content to pass through. So whether it is nudity, it could be pornography, it could be drug abuse, it could be, as Mr. Mahajan rightly mentioned, videos about rape, animal violence, so on and so forth. That would quite clearly come under what I would call as content moderation. as per community guidelines. And then, of course, yes, there is this question of whether certain platforms are censoring, in the true sense, free speech in terms of political views, political opinions, events, happenings. We have seen, at least in the last couple of weeks, a massive global disinformation campaign that's going on with
Mm,
regards to the origins of the coronavirus, for example, and
mm,
how suddenly there have been diplomats who've gone on an overdrive for example, on Twitter
yeah.
or on Facebook. You've seen a barrage of accounts that have gone active suddenly. One is trying to duck any kind of culpability for the spread of the coronavirus while also trying to blame the US for being the origin of that, right? This kind of similar behavior was also seen during the Hong Kong protests, for example, where certain Twitter, for example, or Facebook did take action against certain kinds of accounts that they saw was there. Internally, of course, everybody knows it's called the Great Wall of China, even when it comes to their own internet. And initially, when the coronavirus did break out, there was censorship on WeChat, for example, right? There was the doctor who unfortunately lost his life. But when he was warning people, his messages never reached. Um, there was, I think, Citizen Lab in Toronto. I'm not sure that, yeah, but I think Citizen Lab also reported that even internationally, WeChat, for example, was actually censoring content, although they've denied the same. But yes, those dangers are always there. Of content being censored, of what might not be convenient for a ruling party or a ruling government to kind of block that content out.
Mr. Mahajan, again, the double standards. Now, if you can look at China's business model, I beg your pardon, when you look at how China deals with companies who have to set up shop in China, and how they want their own companies which are abroad to be treated differently. Just a prime example is Huawei. They're creating such a fuss about any kind of restrictions that are put on security concerns. But the companies from outside who have to work within China have to work within their laws. So why doesn't the same rule apply for Chinese companies when they work in other countries, like in India, like you're saying, they should be following Indian regulation?
You see, we made, in fact, we organized a discussion with the Indian domestic telecom companies, and they told us that uh, not just that they have to work under the Chinese rules, they are not allowed to work there. You don't find any Indian telecom company working in or supplying any equipments to China. So this is for sure. No, not even a single dollar export is made of telecom equipments to China. This is under the rule. Now we have our concerns, and the whole world has got concerns. Even UK, which has
Yeah.
earlier disregarded US suggestion not to go ahead with the Chinese Huawei for 5G. They also have now understood the reason why it was so, and now they have, refused to go ahead with the Huawei. So you see, this is not about the laws of any country. Basically, they are so touchy about their strategic concerns. But I don't know why our government and our people and our ministers they feel proud in saying that, okay, all means all. What does it mean? All doesn't mean all. All must include only those who are friendly with us. All would include those who have those who respect reciprocity. All means that only those who do not have enmity with India. So I really fail to understand why our ministers say all means all.
Just coming to you, Raj, again on this, the larger issue. Now we're looking at apps, we're looking at Chinese companies, telecom companies, but because of the widespread and deep nature of Chinese technology all through the world and in India, of course, how worried are you about security? I mean, CCTV cameras, drones, everything is Chinese manufactured.
Yeah, I mean, I think over the last couple of decades, China has played a very pivotal role in our technology supply chain. A lot of things are manufactured from there. I have never been to China, but all the accounts I've heard now seem to tell me that China is far more advanced when it comes to their own technology as compared to the United States as well. They're far more attuned to digital payments than the US is. The surveillance that the Chinese state has mandated is one of the most sophisticated ever in the world, and they're able to build technology that nobody else can. So, in one way, I think China is very, very pivotal to the entire supply chain of technology hardware when it comes to the manufacture of it. Uh, and that, of course, does raise a lot of doubts, especially given that I think there was an article that the Wired had done. So, or I'm not sure if it was Wired or if it was another publication about how I think there was some kind of hacking that was happening within certain chips or those kinds of things. So that does raise a lot of doubts. Apple definitely denied them and said that we don't know of such things. But yeah, I guess given that sometimes value sets are different in terms of how nations operate, in terms of the structure and form of government that's there, it does often lead to this kind of distrust with regards to security, especially for a country like India, which shares a very vast border, where relations between the two are tepid at best. They're good at times, they're bad at times. You also wonder that when you are using such products from a security perspective, what is it that we know and what is it that they already know? Uh, that often tends to be the case. So whether it's our CCTV cameras or whether it's
Yeah.
drones that the security agencies are using, they're all manufactured in China. Some of them are app operated, which means we don't know where that data is residing. But from India's strategic interest, the question is, how do we secure that? How do we what kind of rules should we be mandating for such use cases, which is critical to our national security? Uh,
Mr.
there,
Mahajan, yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
I don't know. So I guess yeah. From that perspective, that India doesn't have a personal data protection law yet. But in certain when it comes to matters of defense, when it comes to matters of security, I think we need to have our laws in place. Our government needs to take a more solid stand in terms of how they want to deal with some of these issues.
Right, Mr. Mahajan, the point that's being raised here by Rajneil is that there may be laws that say govern financial data. User data still is not under Indian data protection laws. You've raised the question of you've been telling the government or organizations like you have been telling the government, and they have not been taking the decisions that you want. How important are lobbying, if I can use that word very loosely? Now, when we look at people who head these organizations, and every business is entitled to have anybody who they think will be able to further their business interests in that country. If you look at the US and what's happened there with TikTok, you have a very prominent personality, Disney Plus CEO, who's now heading TikTok there. Is the lobbying for what those companies would say is their legitimate business rights affecting tough government laws or restrictions on protecting our interests, Ms. Mahajan?
You see, as per Indian law, lobbying is not legal.
Yeah, that's why I use the
It may
term
be legal
very,
in
but you know
US.
what I mean.
Yeah. So, if anybody is found lobbying, whether it is an individual or a government functionary
No,
or
no,
a
forget the
government,
lobbying part. Suppose they've hired an Indian of prominent business stature to head their organization, and his job profile is naturally to look after that company's business interests. Is the government looking at that too much? I mean, my basic question is, why is the government not taking strict action when it comes to national interest?
you see, government generally takes strict action, and it is for sure. But I sometimes feel surprised why it is not taking that action against TikTok. Maybe the bureaucrats and those who are advising the government, they are not showing the true picture about our rights and our law which can be invoked. Sometimes we find that government functionaries, they say they feel helpless that okay, we are not able to implement it. But what I feel is that there are laws in India which can very well protect Indian interests, and in and why we have chosen the parliament, why we elect parliamentarians in the government to make laws. You see, and it doesn't take long. It takes hardly a few minutes to pass an ordinance. When we can pass ordinance for land laws, we can pass ordinance for labor laws, we can pass ordinance for other things. Why can't we make
So,
a pass an
are you saying that
give a
Parliament is not being able to pass a law, so you are suggesting that the government pass an ordinance? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, whatever we need to protect our Indian national interest, strategic interest,
Okay.
the government is very and we are sovereign government. We don't have to ask China or US for passing
Sure.
our law. Yeah, and
Sure.
nothing is coming in between. No international agreements are coming in between. So this is for sure. Yeah.
Ashwani Mahajan and Rajneil Kamath, thank you so much for joining us with your perspectives. This is a debate that we can go on endlessly about, but I thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And if you want to log on to our website, stratnewsglobal.com, to get all the latest news and analysis of global events. You can also follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook to get the latest updates, as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you just click on the bell icon, you will get live notifications for videos like this when we upload them. Thank you so much for joining us on Talking Point this week.